Hey, what is up guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to my series Gran Turismo Rewind, a series in which we hope to deep dive into every single Gran Turismo title. So not only in this series am I trying to 100% each game as much as possible, I'm also going to be releasing some bonus content along the way, whether that's the best ways to make money in each title, some of the prize cars and some secrets and Easter eggs throughout the series. So hopefully you guys can strap in and enjoy the series as much as I am going ahead and making it. We're going to continue on with Gran Turismo 1 for part 2. We're heading over to get all of the gold A licenses. These are probably some of the trickiest in the game, and whilst this one doesn't necessarily feature a super license, this will be the final of the kind of, standard license test that kind of put a section of a track and we have to go ahead in certain cars and basically absolutely nail it. Then obviously we'll head into the IA license, which features basically a super license kind of vibe to it, where we'll have to do one lap test, but that will come in part 3. So for part 2 we are mainly focusing on the A licenses, the final section tests of this overall license of GT1, getting all gold and trying to catch that legendary car prize. Sit back, enjoy and let's strap in. So A class licenses, as you can see, this is the middle of the license test. As mentioned in the intro there, this is the final one with the sort of split sectors to it, and it's going to get, well, only harder from here. A lot of people do say these are the hardest tests of the entire game, and I do somewhat agree. There is some very tricky licenses in here, mixed in with some relatively easy ones. Now we start off with one that is fairly easy in comparison to some of the others. We're taking the Toyota Supra at the first section of Deep Forest. However, we are starting on a downhill slope, tackling the final corner, going down the main straight and then heading into that very tough turn 1, where you have to bring it wide, get it braking and then try and whip the car around and back up the hill, and that will complete the license test. Now to begin with, we did okay, we managed to get the pass basically first time, but that was only enough for bronze, and we are obviously going for all golds in these tests. Third time would be the charm though when it comes to the Supra and test A1. Now in terms of the starting, I do recommend trying to do the low revs between 3000 and 4000 RPM, then start shifting up relatively early, don't completely rev the car out. I did notice when it came to the overall top speed, I was hitting higher top speed by shifting up between 6,000 to 7,000 RPM. If I tried to go onto the red line, it would just kind of, top out relatively early. We're taking it nice and wide and then we're going to slip it inside. Now we do get very lucky there. There's a little bit extra and we would have absolutely failed the license test. We go up and over the line and finally that will be enough on the third try for gold prize. So not a bad start. In terms of the second license test, it's going to be the return of the Toyota Supra once again. So this license test is going to see us using the full layout of Autumn Ring. It's going to start us just before the main start finish straight, so we've got this very fast left right section. However, due to the standing start, we're not going to be at the major high speeds we will typically be here. Then we go into turn 1, which is very much like Grand Valley. However, it is much easier in terms of its approach, entry and exit. It's much more smoother overall without the massive elevation changes that we see in terms of Grand Valley. Overall, a fairly easy gold medal for this one, and then the false sense of security is completely wiped away when this one appears. This is the Mazda RX-7 at Grand Valley. Whilst most people will go on record and say that A4 is the most notorious test of the bunch, I would happily sit there and say that A3 for me was an absolute living nightmare, and although I'm still trying to adjust to the game, it was absolutely horrific. However, we would finally get that gold medal after what feels like 50 plus tries in a row. To be totally honest though, it was at this point that I realised the default setting for duck station when it comes to the analog sensitivity on a controller is set way too high. In fact, after turning that down by around about 20 to 25%, all of a sudden the game felt like I remembered it originally. The cars on that default setting, if you are going down the emulation route, are far too twitchy, and I recommend a setting of turning it down by around about 20 to 25% from the default. This will make the game feel naturally like the original Gran Turismo 1. did on a PlayStation console. So it made the game much easier. We finally got that turn nailed, the car didn't feel overly twitchy, and we did finally get that gold. For me though, the worst of the bunch. Finally, as the gold prize popped up, I genuinely felt a sense of achievement that I don't normally get in racing games these days. And obviously, Kaz told me that I still suck at the game, which he's not wrong. This game is massively difficult in comparison to the more modern titles. It always was as a child as well. Now we're going to head over to A4, which in majority of players' opinions is the hardest one of the bunch. There is no question about it. And I can see why. Now, I got off to what I thought was a relatively good start overall, and I felt like it was going fairly smoothly. I didn't think I was on for a gold, but I thought I was on for maybe at least a silver. In fact, the game was very lenient in terms of touching the walls and such. As you noticed into that right-hander, I did clip the apex and it didn't slow me down too much, but we didn't also get the typical fail that comes on screen. So the game being very lenient in terms of the track limits. Now, I passed it with a 39.1 and thought that, you know, that was going to be all fine, but a typical fail message popped up, and at that point it started to sink in that, okay, this is a very hard license test. In fact, a lot of people say that they've never ever managed to get gold on A4, and I can see why. Now, my best time at this point is a 38.2. You need a 37.4 to get the gold medal, so I'm still way off at this point by around about 0.8 of a second, which is just absolutely ridiculous. So I started to knuckle down, and overall I'd say it didn't take me half as many attempts as it did with A3. I just got a very good run in the later stages. However, still early on, I did manage to make a complete bottle job of it, absolutely smacking myself off the inside wall. So it was time to reset and absolutely knuckle down for one final run to get that gold. So some of the key differences between the cars is where they like to be revved to get going. Now, the Supra likes relatively low revs. I found that the R33 GTR that we're using here does like to be revved much higher. So that's the way I would typically drive this car, and I feel like that did help out a lot. As well as it being four-wheel drive, it's much easier to just throw the car into the corners and have the car grip. I think where a lot of people will go wrong with this one is just being far too cautious of those, I guess, track limits and, you know, the hitboxes and detection to get that fail. You will have to massively smack a wall to get the game to fail you, so you can kind of use that to your advantage. So we did get it passed with a 37.275 to finally get that gold prize medal and get perhaps the hardest two license tests of the bunch out the way and done with. Next up came a very weird test. This is one that has a car that features different weights depending on the version you're on. So PAL, this is a very easy test. You know, this car weighs a lot less than what you'll see in the Japanese and American versions. Now, I am playing the NTS-U version here, so that is the US market version. So this car does have extra weight on. Now, the gold time is very lenient no matter what, I'd say, although we do have that extra weight and the car isn't as fast in this version as it will be in, I believe, the PAL version that has a massive kilogram weight reduction difference. We are going to manage to get the gold on our first try, which really did quite surprise me. So that false sense of security is once again kind of back in the room with us here. However, it wouldn't stay in the room for too long, as the MR2 was up next at Deep Forest, on perhaps one of the tightest and trickiest sections in the entire game. Now, the reason it's so difficult is the fact that the trees actually do cover the track in this game, meaning visibility is at a bare minimum. Couple that with the very awkward handling of the MR2 and you have an absolute slideshow on a pretty much blind section of track. It really does make this test much harder than it needs to be. As you can see, we got off to a terrible start, but that handling kept being a complete menace every single time I was running it. So in the end, I just decided to absolutely just use that to my advantage and start drifting around the course. As you can see though, a good few tries later and we were still only managing to get the bronze medal. So at this point I felt like I've been here forever just trying to get these gold license tests, and I feel like the MR2 was just a kind of final nail in the coffin in terms of me getting ready to just give up and throw the towel in for the day. But I decided to give it one final try to see if we could salvage anything from these runs, whilst I had the momentum with me and the muscle memory in how this game feels and drives once again. Especially now I'd absolutely managed to nail those analog settings. We've got a very smooth section through probably the two awkward parts. We didn't hit the tunnel and we managed to get it on the inside. Now I thought the grass was definitely going to fail me there, but we did manage to cut it just enough that we didn't get the fail and we took away the gold. Next up is perhaps the most memorable license test in the entirety of Gran Turismo 1 for me. That is the little miniature circle with the Subaru Impreza. Now what's good about this one is the game felt very lenient on the wars itself. Even if you do get it wrong, there is a chance that the game may fail you or may not. If you full on whack it, it is going to fail, but if you just gently kind of skim along it, it will actually let you get away with it. So it's all about doing laps on this miniature circle. It always made me dizzy as a kid, and it was still the same now, where it was very confusing due to the camera angles on this game. So you can get a very relatively easy gold medal. I got mine first time. It was much more lenient than I remember it being as well. So that leads us into the final license test of the A licenses. At this point I got my momentum back after finally nailing the MR2 test and getting gold medal first time with a Subaru. I kind of learnt my lesson from A3 with the RX-7, as we're running a very similar layout here. However, it does have the added extra of going downhill and then tackling another fairly tough and tighter hairpin turn. However, without the cold elevation changes and the bumps going into the turn, it is much easier at that point. Overall, the Supra is much more easier to drive than the RX-7 as well. It just felt overall a much more stable car. So it was all about trying to just kind of take my time and make sure that we do qualify to get that A license. So as long as we pass it, we're pretty much all good. At that point, we've achieved the A license and we'll just have to go back for the gold. If I get the gold at the same time, then, you know, we're quids in, massive bonus in my favour there. However, we aren't going to manage to get the gold straight away, so it was all about just learning the layout of the license test. As you can see, this final corner here, it's very difficult to get the entrance and the exit absolutely spot on. The car will sometimes just skid up and then not exit as well, or you'll just completely overshoot it and run that little bit too wide and have to correct yourself. However, we did get a silver first time, and that will give us our A license and give us the acquisition to be able to go into some of those tougher and I guess more mid-game events in-game. So then we went for the gold medal run, and it wouldn't actually be too bad. I think it took me around about 9 tries to get this one. However, we weren't making the same mistake that we was with A3, where we'd basically clip the entrance to the first original turn and then go off wide. So it was much more stable overall. It was all about just trying to go to the Supra's strengths of shifting early, getting those revs right, and just absolutely having a great smooth run. And that's what would happen here. As you can see, the car not bouncing around as much. We're then going to get it into the slide, counter it, and then try and exit as fast as possible into this downhill section. Now again, you can lose a lot of time here. It's very deceiving considering you can't really see where the course is going to go at this point. So it's absolutely flat out into the right. It's then going to go into this very quick left, managing to keep the car as stable as possible, braking into the right-hander, once again get it into a slide but not too much, getting a great exit up and then over the line to get that gold medal and fully complete all golds in A license. Something I'd never achieved as a kid, I'd finally achieved all these years later. So there it was, gold prize, all gold medals, and that is going to give us a new car in our garage. So let's have a look at exactly what prize car we get for getting all golds, and it's going to be the Supra in a completely different form. This is the TRD 3000 GT. As you can see, a visually stunning car, and one that you're probably going to see a little bit later in this playthrough. No spoilers there, but this is overall a solid little car for a gold prize. So there we have it for part 2 of my Gran Turismo rewind for Gran Turismo 1 as we try and tackle that 100% playthrough. So that is 2 of the license tests, all gold. It's going to be a little bit different next time as we go into International A, which is a little bit like a super license where it is just 1 lap challenges only, featuring a TVR and a Dodge Viper. So 2 of the toughest cars in games in terms of spinning them out and being very, very powerful, tackling majority of the tracks in game. This is going to be a very fun next episode. I'll bring that to you next week on a Thursday thank you so much for watching. Thank you to all of my channel members. I'll see you in the next one. Have a fantastic day where you are. Peace.